Okay. Are we ready to start? Good morning, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, very good. And you?
Very good. It's a long time since we saw each other. My God.
Indeed. A very long time.
You haven't changed a bit. You're still.
Well, I feel older.
I don't see it at all. And then
I'm glad to hear.
Valiana.
It's the distance to the camera. Hola, Valiana.
Hola, buenos días.
Hola.
Hola.
Is everybody, let me see if everybody, yeah, people are already here. Great. Okay. So let me just introduce you guys. Okay. And I'm going to, Valiana, I'm going to introduce you as part of the group, the Colectivo Suumil Móokt'aan. Is that the right pronunciation?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, so I'm just going to introduce you as part of that group. Is that okay with you? Is that fine?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
Will we see the faces of the participants or no?
They're there. They're already there.
Yeah.
You can see them.
Because we only guys show your faces. It would be so much more human to see.
Yeah, everybody
faces
show their
instead
faces.
of
Exactly.
names.
Yeah, that's the thing about being part of the school is in relationship to the public. The people in the school have the ability to talk and ask you questions later and participate, and their picture is displayed. So that's one of the great things about being part of the school. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you guys right now. It's going to be a very small interview introduction. Okay, here we go. So I first would like to introduce. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Saas-Fee Summer Institute of Art. We are so excited about having Valiana Aguilar and Antonia Alampi with us today as part of our Cognitive Justice and the Crisis in Epistemologies session. First, I'll introduce Valiana, who is part of the collective who call themselves Colectivo Suumil Móokt'aan. And they are a collection of young people from a generation that is returning to the land, the inability to live from the milpa, the artisanal fishing, due to soil degradation brought about by the invasion of monocultures, agrochemicals, and changes in climate conditions led to the displacement of several generations to the cities and tourist hubs in search of a livelihood for their families. We are coming back to reconnect with our Mayan ways of building, cultivating the milpa, and taking care of native seeds and bees in order to reinvent together our own way of inhabiting the territory. That says it all. That says it all. Antonia Alampi is a friend of mine for forever, and she and I have worked together in many different projects. But she is currently the founding artistic and executive director of SPORE Initiative. Her professional practice as a cultural organizer, curator, and director has been defined by working collaboratively with artists and professionals from different fields and backgrounds, and with small-scale, socially sensitive, politically engaged, and structurally vulnerable organizations. She was the artistic co-director of Saudi Contemporary on the curatorial team of Saas-Fee, curator of Kunsthal Extra City from 2017 to 2019, and curator of Beirut in Cairo from 2012 to 2015, where actually we met in Cairo when I was doing my residency there. She has co-founded projects with strong positions, erratic lives, and little to no funding, such as Future Climates with Ileana Fukinaki, Toxic Commons with Carolyn Ecktander and Simon Mueller. Within and outside of institutions, she has curated and been involved in many types of cultural and artistic projects, research movements, publications, and actions. Let's all give a big hand for Antonio and Valiana.
Should I just take on? Hi, everyone. Yeah, do you hear me well? Yeah, cool. So happy to be with you, and that's why I was asking faces. No, like I think that it's beautiful to be able to avoid traveling, but it's also always weird to speak into a machine. So Valiana and I thought to sort of really briefly introduce our work, respective work, mine at SPOR at the moment, and Valiana's with Suumil Móokt'aan, followed by a few kind of questions that we decided to go along together. And as I understand it, we will have around 40 minutes to speak, and then that will be followed by discussion with you, and I don't know if through messages, right, Warren?
Yes, exactly.
That's more or less yeah. So as Warren mentioned, I'm currently the director of an organization called SPOR Initiative. And basically what we do with a strong base in Berlin, we have what we call the SPOR House in Berlin. So that's where we work from, although we have a team of people coming really from different parts of the world, let's say using English, Spanish, German, and a few other languages as sort of different layers of common languages that we try to speak. And what we do is really produce, facilitate, curate cultural projects at the intersection of climate justice, environmental regeneration, and education. And we do so through what we call a dialogue between Earth protectors in the Global South as much as in the Global North. So basically, even though we do have a base in Berlin, we work elsewhere, and this is also how me and Valiana know each other. We've been collaborating for the past over 2 years. I think this intro sounds great, but I'm sure very, very vague. So I'm gonna sort of draw to a few things to get you a sense of what it is that we actually do. First of all, I wanna know how many of you are familiar with what a spore is? You can raise your hand if anybody knows. What is a spore? So a spore is basically similar to a seed. It's a very, very tiny reproductive body that can do, just like seeds, a lot of different extremely fascinating things, such as, for example, remaining dormant for prolonged moment of times until conditions are suddenly right, and it basically transforms in a being that basically has reproductive power and hence can essentially actually blossom into almost infinite forms of life. So it can literally co-create ecosystems. Spores, differently than seeds, are actually produced by mushrooms and a few other plants, and they're super, super tiny. They're almost invisible, and they're pretty much everywhere. Mushrooms produce zillions of spores, and some of you may be breeding them actually right now. And what mushrooms are the organ of sexual reproduction of the fungus, and the fungus are extremely large and extremely ancient bodies and species that are basically under the ground. So the mushrooms somehow become actually the most visible parts of it, and they produce spores. And I want to pause on two aspects of this, which we have taken on, right, by using the spore as a metaphor of not what we do, but more the typologies of people and groups we work with. One is the aspect of the spore representing, let's say, a connection between the past and the future, really from ancestry and ancestral bodies to potentiality into the future, literally from fungus to spore. And the other one is the matter of scale. Spores are extremely tiny, and so are the groups that we're working with. You may have never heard of them before, actually, but they carry the fundamental potential of protecting life on Earth. And this is why I want to quote, some research that is not produced by us, but by, I'm sorry, now I only see my own face, gigantic, but anyway. I want to quote research by, World Bank, among many other NGOs, indigenous people represent, indigenous communities represent only 6% of the world population. Imagine 6%, having been left with a very, very, very tiny percentage of land available as well. Yet they protect 80% of the world biodiversity. So, I mean, the matter of scale is gigantic. And when we talk about protecting or defending the territory, this is not just about the territory on where someone is standing, living, or working. It's about protecting biodiversity thanks to indigenous communities, among other smaller communities, that we still have the biodiversity we can actually, thanks to which we still exist as we do. So based on this, SFRIDAY is a baby institution. We've already started working, we opened in Berlin in April this year. We've kind of been founded not even 3 years ago. And the foundational question of the two founders, who are actually Hans Schöpflin, who's a German entrepreneur and philanthropist that has been involved in many different also environmental justice movements, among others, and Osvaldo Sanchez, who's also a curator, art historian, and critic. The foundational question with whom I started working with them was really like, how can we work?
Quickly.
The one from yesterday doesn't work.
I know.
Are you talking to me? No. I am. So the foundational question is really, how can the work of artists, poets, cultural practitioners, editors, filmmakers, writers, creative pedagogues, how can that work actually be at the service of movements, ideas, tools led by communities actually at the forefront of biodiversity protection, of environmental regeneration, and not the other way around, So, and I think that this is a kind of fundamental question to ask oneself as a curator, as an artist, as a cultural practitioner, as an institution, is really like, how can we stand behind who is doing the work already? Because it's not about reinventing the wheel here. And it's also not about, it's not a authorial competition between who has the most original idea. Anyway, so this is basically how we started working, and this is where Suumil Móokt'aan comes in, and the conversation with Valiana. I met Valiana, or we met Valiana, almost 3 years ago. It was one of the first conversations we were having, and it started in Yucatan, which is in southeast Mexico, facing the Caribbean Sea, and through a whole lot of different connections, we came into contact in a moment in which Valiana and Angel Ku, partner in crime and life, were about to begin the work with Suumil Móokt'aan. And maybe I'll pass it on to you now, Valiana. So actually, before saying what it is that we did together, we could say really what you guys, because actually when we met, the space was just beginning, no? So we were both in this birth moment at the same time, basically. And hence the dialogue into how can the realm of culture be relevant, but also what can an institution in the global north do for a community, based on the other side of the world, but also, what can, there is not only the global south, global north, but also the urban rural, right? We are an institution existing in Berlin, which is an extremely urban area, having mostly experience with culture. So, where do things come together in a relationship that is as equals and not just one of the two just serving the interests of the other? And it's on this footing that we actually met and started conversing. And so I think that in particular, it was really important for me to then extend the conversation to Suumil Móokt'aan upon this invitation, Warren, on the one hand, because it is very important to include indigenous practitioners, in this case, Maya practitioners, into a conversation. It also has to do with ecology and ecological regeneration and environmental justice. And then in particular, someone that has been so extremely relevant, I think, for the birthing of our recent work, especially. So Valiana, I'll leave it on to you now to
Thank you, Antonia, for the beautiful introduction. It's always beautiful to hear you talking about mushrooms and sport. It always gives me more clues than I had before about the mushroom. So it's really beautiful to hear you every time that you share it, because it's different, no? And I learn a lot. And thank you also for this space. And yeah, we are now, I'm now in Suumil Móokt'aan. I'm based in my community, that it's a Mayan community, that it's in Sinanche. It's in the coast of in the south of Mexico. And basically what we are doing here, as Antonia in the introduction say, we are here, and we are taking care of the territory and coming back to the territory as a way of resisting also the extractivism, the mega projects that are around here in Mexico. That's how we are connected also. And we start this collective intergenerational learning space in the village. But we really want to have this space, but not as a space of like an institution that it's like isolated from the community. We really want to reclaim the life of our grandparents and our ancestors also. And we start to remember how they lived and how they were taking care of the territory in their daily life. When we talk about the defense of the life, the defense of the territory, we are not talking only about the big manifestations, but we are talking of how during maybe thousands of years our ancestors were living here, and they were doing their own life in their own way, and they were reclaiming that life through the aspects of the daily life, like how we are eating, how we are healing, how we are learning. And nowadays, like we grew up like with our grandparents, and we know how they used to live, and we know how we grow, how we eat, how we used to eat. But then we were forced to move to the city in order to study, in order to do other things. And then the institutions and the outside made us to forget who we are. And then we decided to come back and reclaim that forgiveness. We don't want to forget who we are. We want to reclaim who we are through our memory, through ancestral memory. So we start what we call the Solar Maya. The Solar Maya is basically this space that every family in the community have, that it's not too big, but it's not too small. It's at the right scale of how we can live. And in this space, we have several elements of the daily life, and we are trying to reclaim that elements, that spaces, also in order to say we are learning in these spaces. We are not just living, we are embody that learning, and we are sharing that learning through other generations, especially with youth and children. And we start the work and we start the conversations also with Antonia and say, what can we do here? How we can learn together, not only as this space that it's outside the community, or how we could have these tools to share with others what we are doing and what can we do in the village with the solar. So that's how we start, like a cartography, a very beautiful cartography with the sport that we are using. And this cartography, it's how we are actually living and creating this space, that it's based here. And it's connected with all the knowledge that the grandparents here were saying and sharing to us, but also with elements that comes from not only from the past, from the Mayan past, but also reclaiming knowledge that it's from other communities and collectives that are helping us to engage new challenges as Mayan communities. For example, the water. We have a water situation here that it's basically about because of the toilets and how the toilets are using the water and contaminated the water that it's, here we don't have rivers. We have like rivers underground, and all of them are connected. Like the water here, the clean water, it's only 3 meters behind the soil. So if we connect the toilet and the water from the toilet to that spaces, to that holes, all the water is contaminated. So that is the new challenge that we have as Mayan communities. What can we do to heal the water? That it was not our fault, actually. It happened because the system forced us to connect the water to these toilets. So what we are trying to do is to reclaim other knowledge that we are learning from other parts, such as the dry toilets and new technologies that are adapt to our territories. And also we are trying to adapt the cistern of rain, the recollection of rainwater, some other eco-technologies that we could adapt actually to our own ways of living, but based on who we are and based on our own materials, regional materials that we have here. And that's part of the conversations and learnings that we are having here in the collective. Yeah, that's basically what Suumil Móokt'aan is doing. A lot of things more that I could say, I'll share, but maybe we could.
Yes, I can. Yeah, no, because I'm thinking, when we met, they had basically this idea, exactly, like having a plot of land and how to revitalize in a way the tradition of the Maya Solar within new contemporary challenges, and also I think in view also of different types of technologies that are coming along. So one of the things that you talked about immediately when we met was, for example, how to consider a dry toilet system, precisely to find ways of going beyond the contaminated as you called, water pipe system that was implemented. But then there is the whole question of seed sovereignty and creating a seed library. There is something about Melipona bees, which are basically native bees to Yucatan, almost under threat of extinction because they produce also very little honey. And so in a way, unfortunately, the role of bees, of pollinator, always suffers vis-a-vis the role of the bee as a honey producer for a honey market, and that was very important also to think about. So much honey in Germany actually comes from Yucatan. Bees that at the same time are under incredible threat because of the glyphosate that is actually used in monocultural industrial plantation on the pork industry. So forms of, let's say, healing the land that, as Valiana beautifully said, are going really from ancestral knowledge to the present. And I think that something maybe that we could touch upon, Valiana, is that is the aspect of also, let's say, Maya cosmology, in the sense that a lot of this is also not just technicalities. It's not just talking about technical aspects of, how to improve, be it water healing or water protection, be it different system of agriculture like the milpa system. It's not just technicalities, right? It's also embedding it in a much larger cultural system that I think really challenges the sort of value, the hierarchy of values of what constitutes, in Spanish to say buena vida, a good life, and hence, yeah.
Yes, when we talk about territory, when we talk about land, it's not only a piece of land, a piece of land with some herbs and with some plants and with some trees, and we are talking about our knowledge, or more the deepest knowledge that our elders or our ancestors passed to us during several generations. And for us, the way that we inhabited the land, and we take care with tenderness. And I want to put this in the center of the conversation also, about how we could recreate our relation through tenderness, and especially with the territory. For us, we don't own the land owns us. And that specific point of the bees, for example, that Antonia shared with us. The bees, the ancestral bees that we have are called the Shunankap or the Melipona bees. We know through the codex of our ancestors that they lived with us more than 3,000 years ago. And we were taking care of these bees the same way as we are taking care of now, in the same way. Like how this knowledge survived these thousands of years. We do it because we know that these bees were deeply connected with the territory. These native bees that are called the Shunankap, we know that pollinate 80% of the native forest. And I'm talking about the native forest is the forest that we have here, that it's not introduced, that it's the forest that is living in the territory. And we know if they are not here, we are not also here. If the bees die, we are not going to have any forest, because that's the forest that we used to have in the past. And that ancestral knowledge, it's embodied with us. And it's not only about, yeah, we have bees and then we make business with the honey and we export the honey. For us, it's not like that. For us, we make the ceremonies to connect also with the way that's to appreciate them, to be grateful for their life. And we also, the Melipona bee, they recollect honey and pollen and pollinate around 1 kilometer around us. So we need to take care of the territory that we have around us specifically. And that's the way that we connect also with that knowledge, because it's not only about the life of the bees isolated from us, it's about the life of us, and with us, I mean, not only the we that we are saying as person, but as a whole body, a collective body that it's embodied also with the territory. And I don't know if I could share a photo maybe of the Melipona. So I don't have the permission, I think, to share. Okay. Just briefly want to share some photos so you could. This is the codex that we are talking about, and also Sport have this beautiful book that they made with children also. In this codex, you will see the Melipona. This is the bee that it's like there. This you could see it now better. But then it's the same bee that we have now in our own piece of land in Suumil Móokt'aan. This is the way that we are still keeping it as a very ancestral way to reclaim the knowledge and how we are connected. And about the seeds also, we have seeds and we cultivate the milpa. The milpa is this system that exists over hundreds of years ago that we call ourselves the people of corn. And we don't only call ourselves as a metaphor. We live from corn. We eat corn every day. And we have this deep connection with the territory through the milpa, to cultivate our own seeds. So what we are facing now is the introductions of these new seeds that are apparently the better seeds, hybrid seeds, GMO seeds, pesticides. Vandana Shiva said this about like how the chemicals that are used now for the agro industry are the same chemicals that were used in war. So these chemicals are they are not allowed in some places, but these chemicals are allowed here in Mexico. So these companies throwing all these chemicals to the bees, and the bees are dying and are contaminated also the water. We know that in Campeche, for example, the women, indigenous women, are the most affected by these agrochemicals because they made some tests and they realized that the milk or the breast milk were contaminated with glyphosate. So we know that these bodies of the women are the most affected also by the agrochemicals. But what can we do in this? Like, we know what is happening with the chemicals, but what can we do in the community? How we could reclaim that knowledge again? So we decided to reclaim it doing the milpa. We are not only going to say, okay, the chemicals are bad in the community, we don't want to use chemicals, but what can we do collectively? So we decided to reclaim the ancestral knowledge through the seeds. And they are elders that say that the seeds have memory. And we didn't understand what they were saying with this, like how the seeds have memory if they are seeds, no? And then we started to know like how the seeds actually could have the memory to remember some seasons that they live, and they could adapt to, for example, what we are calling climate change, because the seeds are so old that they could remember all the seasons that they live in their life. So if we have seeds, for example, that survive the floods here in Yucatan, that now they could remember how to grow with that season, or seeds that could survive dry seasons, like the one that we have now. We have a very hard, dry season, no raining. But we have seeds that could survive this specific stage that we are facing. And these seeds are not the hybrid or GMO seeds. These are our seeds, or ancestral seeds. And we know that in our ancestrality, we have many answers of the crisis that we are living. And I will leave it there. I talked too much.
No, it's very good. And I think you really touched upon something really fundamental, right? Which is also why seed libraries and seed diversity is so fundamental, because you will not use the same seeds in the same conditions. So on the one hand, it's also reclaiming and the necessity of sort of seed intelligence that can only be based on pluriversal forms of keeping, protecting, and farming, just like why monocultural plantations are much more vulnerable to any kind of, underquote, attack. I think that, actually, can I share my screen as well? Maybe I can show you, can somebody enable me? Okay, great. I could show you, yeah, I mean, just to show you, this is the space of Suumil Móokt'aan when we met. And I think something maybe that we also didn't talk about, and that's, you know, Angel also would be one of the co-founders perfect for it, was also the aspect of spaces of living and of life. Because I think, as Valiana was saying, I mean, to pause on two things that you said, Valiana. On the one hand, I think there's the aspect of reclaiming knowledge, but also a certain degree of autonomy, and that is in food sovereignty, right? Re-nurturing local, native, or endemic fruits and vegetables. There is autonomy in medicine, you know, like reclaiming also forms of healing that are not just based on curing or on Western pharmacological understanding, which is, you know, you can get whatever and then there's a cure for it that's going to be sold to you. But like, how do you actually work on prevention and not just on cure? And on the other hand, there's also the aspect of building space, building habitats, building house. And I think one of the first things was also about reclaiming what, I mean, I think it theoretically called vernacular architecture, but it's really like how to build with local materials. how to build an architecture that is resistant and resilient towards the actual climate, right? Because so much of colonial architecture has basically built both with materials and in formats that made absolutely no sense with the actual climatic conditions of a territory, being flexible enough, for example, to respond to typhoons, to respond to droughts, floodings, etc. And so what you see is really Suumil Móokt'aan in the making in this case, where a lot of thinking, and it wasn't just, and I think this is really important, it's also not just about romanticizing the past. It's really thinking about the past in the present, which means thinking about culture as a living culture that inevitably responds, just like oral culture, right? Like it responds to who is speaking, to from where, to what materials will be available, and it's just not stuck in any sort of dogmatic or unmovable understanding. And I think this is really important, the understanding of culture as a living culture. And something else that really I was thinking while hearing you talk, which was beautiful, is connected to actually a reading that I was having just recently. And this was an article on The Guardian by Rebecca Solnit that was talking about the fact that today climate doomers, what she calls climate doomers, might be a bigger problem than climate deniers, which are, you know, a lost cause anyway. But like how many people sort of, this is the Mayan Solar that we were talking about that we also did together, which is really show Suumil Móokt'aan and the different elements of the space, which is also really a collective space for learning, you know, within the community, multi-generational learning. Anyway, I had to think about what you were talking about when you were saying, yes, there's the chemicals and the threats and, you know, loss of land, loss of biodiversity, but then that what is fundamental is, I think, a consistent commitment to finding solutions. You know, she was talking in this case, what is the role of hope? Hope is not there when things are going well. Hope is actually necessary precisely in the other moments. And it's not just happiness or feeling content. No, it's that. Hope is the consistent commitment to search for possibilities. And I think this is really important to remember, because very often, while climate doomers and defeaters may navigate specifically and particularly the global north, communities at the forefront are fighting like hell for survival. And I think that's very important to remember. Maybe another question that I wanted to pose was, given that time is also moving, was a bit of a, not a provocation, but I think it's something that then I want to pose to you also as participants of the study group, which is what can you actually offer, right? Like we in cities, we probably sitting in university classes, especially at this stage of our life, like it's not just about like, and I think in these dimensions also, right? Like it's not just about learning from indigenous culture. I think it's really about what can you offer to the protectors? Like how can you protect the protectors? What do you think you can actually offer? And so I wanted to both ask a question to Valiana, which is, what do you think, Valiana, that, for example, a group like the one listening to us may be offering to a space like yours? And then I would love to sort of really ask you, what do you think you can actually offer to groups and communities that are actually protecting biodiversity, that are working in environmental regeneration? As simple as it is from where you're standing, but I think it's a really important, be it real or only speculative, I think it's a really important exercise to think about, which is reciprocity, right? Like, where are the terms of the reciprocal relation? And I hope you did read the text that I put in the reader, which is a beautiful text by Tania Martinez, who's indigenous Ayuk woman and a researcher. And what the text was really about is really like how to decolonize relations in also research institutes between global north and global south, with quite a few practical points to think about, but I think it very much relates to this kind of situations and relations.
Very big question, huh? What we are. Yes, I would like to share some thought. Maybe I don't have the answer to that, because that could be, or maybe should be this big conversation and exchanging together and how we can do, what can we do collectively. But I could share some thoughts that we have to all these years that we have been collaborating with other friends and collectives from like sport, but also with others, artists also. And yes, like one of the first thought that I have when somebody asked me like, what can we do? Like how we could support you. And we say that the first thing that we say is, as Antonia beautifully say at the beginning, like we are all over connected. We are connected. We cannot think that because I'm living there, I'm living in a city, I am not connected with any territory in the world. No, the people is connected to a territory. Even if we live in the city, even if we don't have a piece of land, even if, because everything that we are doing, everything that we are eating, everything that we are consuming, it's part of a territory. Maybe that relation could be a relation of exploitation or not. Maybe we are connected through farmers to another farm, another form, but we are connected to the land, to a territory. We cannot disconnect ourselves. We are not individuals. Our life depends on many layers of this complex life that it's the Mother Earth. And yes, like we need to think in that, like start to think like how we are connected to our own territories, how we are having these relations in our own context, what we are doing, how we are eating, how we are healing, how we are learning, and who is making this possible for us. And that's one of the first things that I have and thought, sorry. And then another thought that I'm imagining is how we have the opportunity because of the sport to be in Berlin in April. And it was really like, for me, it was very impacting because I didn't know Berlin, I didn't know Germany. But for me, the most impacting thing is that there are several groups there having the same struggles that we have here in Yucatan and facing almost the same problems as we have here. We visit a farm that one of the biggest problem that they have is that the youth are not longer working the lands. And most of them, they are forced to leave the places to go and have a job in the city. And this is the same face of this different face of the coin that we have here. The youth are migrating, are being forced to go to another places to work because they are not longer staying and working in the lands and taking care of the territory. And what happens if we have an empty community? The land, it's available for all the companies, it's available for the mega projects to establish and make this extractivism that we are talking about several times here. And it's a topic also now in the conversations that are internationally, how the extractivism is affecting and creating this climate change and everything. But what happens if we are forced to leave the land, to leave the territories that we are taking care? And yeah, that we need to know what are the struggles in our own context. And very specific struggles could be like what we are eating, like how we are relating ourselves, what we are, with the person that are cultivating our food, or how we are cultivating our own food, and how we could create these networks between us in order to learn together and resist. And the other part of what we learned when we were in Berlin, it was these moments in which we could connect with others through our practice. like what we are doing, how we are doing this, and how we could learn together, and how we could exchange knowledge that we have. When we were there, we learned about the preservation of food, that it's a question that we have now in the village, like how we could preserve food with this crisis that we had in the community about the food, and how we could have access to local food and not to buy food from the outside. But if we want to have that access, how we could also preserve that food, exchange that food. And we didn't know about this. That it's a knowledge that it's not common in the community, because we used to live in the stage. We have fruits from several seasons, but now the climate change is changing all. It's changing all. So what we are learning there is, in Berlin, they have a lot of knowledge about the preservation of the food, because they have several seasons and they need to face several seasons also, especially in the winter. And we don't have winter here. We don't have, we only have dry season and rainy seasons here, and it's hot in all the year. So we could, yeah, like the point is how we could exchange this knowledge and how we could use also the groups. And if you are doing some, like, for example, in art, like we are trying to work with artists to connect the struggles and how we could like spread the word of what is happening, how we could like be in the spores, throwing, growing, flying all over the spaces to know what we are doing, and how we could connect also with the struggles that we are facing here. Because we need to, in order to protect the territory, we need also to weave with other territories, to weave other knowledge together. And yes, that's kind of the points that I want to share with you. It's not an answer, it's more like how we could have this conversation together.
Thank you so much. I feel we maybe want to open it up to either questions or conversations or simply shared reflections. Maybe what I can say following Valiana is that in a way that's really what kind of SFOR has been founded on, the premise of trying to nurture common grounds between what we call cultures of care for the earth, which means an ongoing dialogue and exchange that does take into consideration reciprocity and really beyond, you are paid a fee, hence you're giving and others are taking, for example. So for example, I mean, even to say something really minor, but we have very few people coming to Berlin because it's really important that we stay with our participants. And Valiana is not just giving a workshop, she is having a whole program that basically might be useful for Suumil Móokt'aan's practice, for example. So there's constantly sort of exchanges so that nothing is just a one-night stand relation, but it's actually a relation, which means considering both parties. And then maybe I just wanted to show, I mean, what she mentioned, just to give a practical example of things that SFOR does. So in this whole conversation that we've been having with Suumil Móokt'aan, but also with UIFSTAN, which is another organization also in Yucatan, also devoted to agroecology and biodiversity protection, nurturing of ancestral traditions into the present. The question of the melipona was very important, especially in sort of how do you transmit the importance of protecting it for the local ecosystem, for which the melipona is a fundamental pollinator, and how do you transmit it to younger generations, and how do you involve also the elderly knowledge in it. And so basically what we did is a collaborative book, like in 3 volumes, which is a children publication, with different things, and go from a poetic intervention, which is really the sort of mythological history of the Melipona to a book, all with illustrations made by kids that we basically supported several workshops. Almost they're all children of families of Melipona culturalists, and it's their own drawing in it. Young researchers, also young generation, all coming from the community who put together the content, and basically where, for example, in this case, spore comes in. This is a leporello, for example, that goes into, on the one hand, the old the codex with the 12 pages that talk about Melipona culture, and on the other side, it's also the work with various children on imagining letters to children of the future. How would you talk to? How would you conserve and talk about Melipona to kids of the future? And then everything is actually also understood as tools. Also, we do not sell. We do distribution ourselves, distribution only in community. All the books are understood not for individual property, but only for community property. So what we do is also we make sure, together with we have collaborators in Yucatan, that it's distributed to communities that will use it and for whom the knowledge is relevant. And so also the publication is only in Spanish and Maya Yucatecan, and it has no presence in Berlin. And where we come in, it's almost, I would say, as co-editors or co-producers more than anything. None of the content comes from us. What we come in is we know how to do books because we come from culture. But then also all the artists, etc., everyone is based in Yucatan and is close and potentially working with the communities already, or we may trigger new collaborations between people that had not collaborated maybe before. And this then is an ongoing, and if you go on our website, you see all the different types of very, very long-term projects that we develop together. And then this continues to nurture more relations and more collaborations. So this idea of entanglement, I think that Valiana, you spoke about is very, very central. And I think it's also about accountability, co-responsibility, and also seeing it not as something that is heavy, but actually as an incredible joy and enrichment to be involved in. And so, yeah. So thank you. And it would be really nice to hear you and to.
Well, thank you very much. My heart, goes out to you, and I really felt your words when you were speaking, and I really felt your problem, and I'm so glad that you've come to Saas-Fee, and I'm glad that Antonio had the genius to invite you, and because I think at the root of this situation is basically a problem of cognitive justice, which is part of this term. It's a matter of respect for other epistemologies. It's a matter that there is a kind of chasm between how people feel about the way that capitalist systems operate and how indigenous systems operate, and this chasm, and it's very deep and it's very dangerous, and we're all on the precipice of like falling into it. It's at the heart of this matter, because as you are caretaking the water and you're caretaking the land and all these things, there's the other system, like for instance in the Yucatan, because I've been to the Yucatan, in my life, I suffer from having been a tourist there. When I was a kid, my parents took me there, so I know the Yucatan. And I know that what you're up against in terms of these huge hotels that are probably generating all kinds of waste and are not thinking about caretaking at all, and the tourist industry that is surrounding it, and the kinds of pollution that you're talking about from toilets and into those beautiful cenote that you have, that underground water system that I have experienced. I've spent time in those waters, and they're a miracle. They're a miracle. So it's a huge problem. And anyway, that's my statement. And maybe some of the other participants have something else to say.
Thank you both so much for a very beautiful presentation and dialogue, and just really also moved, as Warren said, by learning about your collaboration and just the tenderness of what you shared. Thank you. I had, which is, could you talk about what experiences you've had or have not tried to pursue with, say, universities or other kinds of formal organizations to support your work? Does that make sense as a question?
Valiana, do you want to go or should I say something? I think it's more for you. Or should, but as you like.
Yeah, but do we hear other and then, or we answer, like how is the dynamic? Yeah.
What do you think? Should we collect questions or should we just answer? Warren?
You are mute.
I think, sorry, I was muted because if everybody has their sound on, then you get all these distortions. So I muted myself. Oh, I think we should have, I think participants should ask questions. I don't think we could also, people who don't
and we
want
just respond, or should we just
but they
collect
can also
questions?
put it in the chat. I mean, some people
Okay.
don't want to ask questions. They don't want to, they want to do the chat. So we do both. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I'm muting myself again.
So should we answer? Yeah, like we have like several collaborations also in the space, because we really believe that it's really important now to weave with other collectives, institutions, partners, I don't know how to name it, in this situation that we are facing. And the situation, it's very hard here in the Yucatan Peninsula. You already hear what is happening with the mega project, the tourism, everything. It's happening here now, and sometimes we believe that. Sometimes we believe that it's the power of being together, of having this collaboration. It's really important. And in Mexico, we do especially with the dry toilet, for example. We work with the students from an university here in Mexico with architects. So there were these young architects that they were studying, and we collectively made the design and talk about not only to make the design, it's the deep conversation about construction and how the universities, for example, are meant to share knowledge that are not based in indigenous or local knowledges also. So it was not only about, oh, we make a design for you and then you build it. No, it was about the deep conversation about how we could really learn about other cultures, other ways of construction that are not based only in cement, that are adapted to conditions that are from here. For example, here we have hurricanes, so we cannot build something that it's not good for the region and the weather and the heat. We could have 40 degrees every day here, and if we build something that it's not based in how we used to live and how we have a good life, buen vivir, we cannot like live good. So we made this collaboration with these students that it was really beautiful. And at the end, they come and they learn not only how to make designs, but how is actually working the vernacular construction, that it's also not based in the knowledge that they teach them in the university, but it's based in the ancestral knowledge also, and how we cut the wood, when we cut the wood, when we recollect the materials, how we recollect the materials, how we make the ceremony for the house, because you cannot construct just a house like this. You need to ask permission to construct, and all these elements that are not part of the curriculum, for example, that they don't even know or could imagine. And that is like one example that I really enjoy in the process and how we exchange. But we have several ways in connected also with a university in the Netherlands and that actually have this program that it's called the Going Local program. And we receive a group of students from the Netherlands, and they come here, but they not only come as tourism or consumption. No, it was a full program, 6 months of program they're based in the Netherlands. And then at the end of the program, they were here for 2 weeks. And they were learning together, we were learning together and facing how we are living, but also not for helping us or say to us what can we do, but to exchange knowledge of how we could do things together in order to protect what we are doing, but also in order to weave the relation between the Netherlands and here, like how everything that it's based in the consumption, in the new energies, the green energies, and everything is affecting also our territories. So that's 2 examples that I want to share. And of course, we have the connection also with the sport and the work that we do together in the cartography, in the leaflet that Antonia shared. Antonia, you want to say something?
No, I think this, Megan, right? This question was more for Valiana, I think, no? And like how they have been working with, for example, research institutions or universities, no?
Yeah, I really appreciate the answer and just learning more. I was curious in part because the reading was kind of about the challenges of such collaborations. And for instance, that university contexts or other funders of research often have certain methodological expectations and constraints, including like the quantification of results. So it's fabulous to hear that you've had positive experiences. I was kind of also wondering if there have been tensions and difficulties around that as well. But I was just glad to hear whatever you wanted to share. So thank you.
I'm reading the email, the question here from Sophia, or maybe Cosiso was first.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed listening to the work that you've been doing and your collaboration. And the question around reciprocity and this idea of like what is being offered back, I think is a really important way of framing it. I've been working, like, I think it's also interesting to use knowledges around food as something that connects us. So I've been looking at the way in which our knowledge of how to make cassava edible comes from indigenous peoples. And so our ability to even eat cassava is an inheritance that comes from indigenous peoples. And so the forms of knowledge production that are indigenous knowledge production are everywhere around us, but we're not aware of it. And when you start to look at that, it starts to make connections between very disparate groups. And so cassava is indigenous to South America, but then ends up in West Africa and is a dominant food crop there. But the knowledge that it comes from the Tainos and the knowledge of the Tainos is lost, right? And there's a relationship there. And so thinking about reciprocity, something was offered to us. What do we offer back, right? And how do you use that as a way of actually building different kinds of solidarity? So what you were saying is just like very much echoing what I've been thinking about and the kinds of relationality that is possible when you start to think about that exchange of knowledge that has been ongoing for centuries.
Valiana, do you want to say something? No, I think it's a beautiful, that's exactly, I think, the point. And that's actually also, I mean, as you said, I think it's a good exercise, because in the end, I think that capitalist ideology has put the level of exchange purely based on what can you afford and what can you pay for. And I think that when you start sort of asking different questions and sort of rethinking what kind of expectations or claims, or, you know, like, I think there are different positions in which you put yourself. And I think it's very much at the core, not only of, as Warren was saying, sort of epistemic justice, but actually also at the core of, or how epistemic justice is also at the core of sort of defining the way in which we relate, not only, let's say, through different types of knowledges, cosmologies, but also different generations. Like, for example, in the work we do, it's very important even that when you work also with children, it's also about what are we offering each other? Like, there's never just, and also if we want to challenge the notion of extractivism, etc., and I think especially when we talk about research institutions or cultural spaces or art spaces, I mean, cultural extractivism is unfortunately still very, very central in many practices, especially when then the places in which things are distributed are predominantly urban, global north, very often, wealthy institutions. And, so it's not just where is the knowledge coming from, that's not where the epistemic justice just stays, but where is it moving? Like, where is reciprocal? Where is it distributed? How are things distributed, and etc. I'm sure you're more eloquent than me in putting it into words, but I think you do get this the point of what I'm saying. So and so that was for us, for example, extremely important institutionally, to really, really embody for real what we mean by that, right? Because I think we're also used to use a lot of like really good words, and they sound amazing. They're very often contained in lots of publications we make, and when I say we make, I mean intellectually sophisticated global north art institutions, curatorial jargon, to put it differently. But then what does that mean, right? Like, how is that really playing out? And maybe I connect now to the second question of Sophia, because I do think that the question of funding, as also Tania Martinez was mentioning, is really, really fundamental. And SPOR, for example, is a private foundation. We're basically entirely funded by Hans Schöpflin, who's an entrepreneur and a philanthropist that has been working on environmental and social justice for the past 20 years. And so we do have, in that sense, a kind of freedom that paradoxically, for example, I've always been working in public institutions before, you would usually not have, because you have to sort of, wear a kind of national flag, and very often you are able to work in different places, but essentially the work is then centralized and being exposed in Berlin, for example, if it's Germany or other, central cities. Or when you think about institutions, you may commission work everywhere, but then exhibitions happen always in the same institutions, no? Think about, there's something really interesting, I think, always to think about when we think about art, which is very often as soon, for example, as an artist's work enters an institution or a collection, very often it will never return back to the place in which it was produced. When we were working in Cairo, for example, right, like most of the artists would then enter the global north and never be allowed back in the global south because they weren't the right infrastructure to host it, or etc. So funding is a huge problem, but again, not to just want to look at problems and to focus at solutions. I think, just like Valiana was saying, I think there's a younger generation of people returning to the land. I think there's also younger generations of people taking on institutions and challenging regular modes of practicing. And I think it's new ways of thinking and doing that can only benefit from methodologies that sort of talk to one another and feel entangled, because it's the multiplicity of the small that will enact change. So I do think that there is a lot that is exciting ahead if we want to truly be committed to looking at what other possibilities there are of doing, and not just being content with, the essentially the status quo. And I think, again, to go back to the Tania Martinez article, I think she's really being very practical. And I think even just being able to share honestly in relations that are obviously, there's always power relations within, is already a great step forward. And so even naming the problem is already a great step forward. Yeah. You're welcome.
Just want to share that the point of Cociso, it was a really beautiful point, and just to share that, of course, the exchanges always happen here in the place. We know we claim this space, Suumil Móokt'aan space, as a space of learning. It's a space also of encounters. So it's not only us talking with institutions or universities, but these spaces for the community. And we also love to engage with other communities that are doing different things, and we are learning from them. And we are learning from also indigenous people from other parts of the world that we didn't know, and we didn't realize how, in our own context, how they are struggling also through food. We really like to put the point of food all the time, because food is something that connects us. And I just realized, for example, that I will never imagine that in Romania they eat the same amount of corn as us in Mexico. I never imagined this in my life. So how Romania, like it's Eastern Europe, eating the same amount of corn as us, but in different forms. I will never think about this before in my life. But also in indigenous communities in the part of Canada, and that they have this almost the same myths and legends as us. So I will never imagine that the Haudenosaunee people, they were talking about the three sisters, and we have the three sisters here at the same time. But yeah, like how this knowledge travels and engage together and weave together, and how we could actually have these connections with other communities. Maybe our ancestors have the same connections. We don't know if at some moment they engage, but we know that this knowledge travels a lot because we are naming it in the same way. So it is like, this is a very beautiful starting point of our conversation, how we could weave ourselves through food also, where our food comes from, the histories of the corn, how it travels, or the cassave, for example. And yeah, thank you for the comment, Cociso.
Is there any more questions from our participants? This has been really an amazing talk. By the way, I'm Anita Osorio. I'm the administrator of Saas-Fee. Nice to meet you both. Very, very lucky to hear your talk. So much to talk about it. I don't want to say so much about it. Actually, I would like participants to really say something. This is a very special moment. We have two amazing people in front of us sharing, these kinds of universes or pluriverses, and we definitely want to know as much as possible from you both. So I don't know if there's any other participant that would like to, take the time, and like Anu said yesterday, we can be bold, we can ask, that's the idea of the Saas-Fee, just to kind of exchange some knowledge and create some theories and, theorize, I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but theorize, around what we're hearing. So I don't know if there's any other participant that would like to say something.
I was wondering also if there isn't anybody, is Sanford Quinter, who I see here, he's one of our faculty, and also Jeremy Dennis is on. Jeremy or Sanford, do you have anything? I assume you're on. Would you like to, Jeremy is from the Shinnecock Nation in Long Island, and he gave an amazing presentation yesterday about his, and you should know about this place that he does called Ma's House, Antonio. You would really love to know about his work because it's right up your alley. But anyway, I was just wondering if Jeremy or Sanford wanted to make a comment. Can anybody hear me? Am I hearable? Yeah, everything cool? Okay. Sanford, Jeremy? here's Jeremy right here. Jeremy, you want to ask a question or talk about this link between your Shinnecock Nation and some of the things you've been hearing about this Yucatan Peninsula?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that presentation really resonated with me. A lot of similarities and parallels with Shinnecock's over hundreds of years of history that's been recorded in history books. And Valiana, I think that when you were mentioning the youth disappearing from taking care of the land and not seeing the value in that, and potentially losing that land as a offset is something that resonates a lot, just because I work with a very small group of Shinnecock people that do ancestral grave and sacred site protection work. And it should be everyone that's trying to protect our land, access to land, our ancestral burial sites. But there is that capitalistic mindset that we have to do something that will get us money. We have to go to the cities. We have to not be degraded as farmers, so to speak. So I really appreciate you presenting, and a lot of overlaps for sure.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was very nice. Yeah, I was wondering, it would be amazing for Valiana to come and visit you there and see what your project is. The Ma House is in, could you, because I know the participants heard about Ma House yesterday, but maybe you could tell Antonia, because I've worked with Antonia and I know what her interests are, and Valiana, maybe you could just, I know you already did it, but would you mind just talking a little bit more about Ma House, like to tell them about the project, please?
Oh, sure. It's basically my family or my grandparents' home that we turned into a communal art space here on the Shinnecock Reservation. And it's very unique because it's one of two in the entire United States art spaces or residencies that exist on Indian reservations. So it's something that I encourage to continue popping up, networking, collaborating. But it's just really the need to battle our community being rendered invisible. So we're in what's known as the Hamptons. Everyone knows it for the mansions, beaches, and parties, and no one recognizes us as being here throughout our 10,000-year history of continued presence. So art has the potential to be disruptive, to make ourselves known when you're such a small nation, especially, or even a small community that you represent. There's a lot of potential there. And so we have a residency, we have a communal library of over 400 native books, we have exhibits. So I'd love for you to come out and visit one day if you're in New York, and probably collaborate in some way.
Thank you. Is Sanford, are you there still? Are you around? Sanford Quinter?
Hi there. Yeah. Look, I'm so sorry. I am here. I'm in and out. I'm a little under the weather, and I got a small little crisis here. I'm going to review those last talks before my own. All I can tell you all is I look forward to it. A fascinating, a great surprise, and an incredibly welcome one that these are the topics of this year's. I guess it's you, Warren, who curated it, but I'm deeply fascinated, and that the problem of whatever you call it, mindset, epistemologies, et cetera, has now expanded, if you like, and even begun to focus on on all these other shall we say, on all these other modalities of knowing, not only the politics, I would like to say. So that's why really I don't feel able to comment now. I just wasn't there for the entire presentations, but even beyond the politics, something much more foundational, really ontological, one could say, and even well, I guess when one can go beyond that, even ontobiological. But anyway, I'm just want to say that it's wonderful. I will catch up more. Probably I'm on a completely different time zone. I'm 10 hours away, so I will by the time next week, Friday turns up, I would like to probably somehow integrate some of the stuff that was just presented. So thanks.
So what can I do for you?
I guess I had a couple questions, if that's all right. I guess I'm really fascinated by the project that you mentioned, Valiana, about the collaboration with the architecture school. I was wondering which school that was, and then if you could talk in a little more detail about the kind of exchange of ideas, theoretical exchange of ideas that happened in that collaboration. I was actually just in Yucatan. I visited Merida for about 3 or 4 days last month, and was really struck by not only like the ancient Maya architectural heritage and everything, but also by the kind of traditional houses that you would see even just driving through small towns in the region, this kind of persistent vernacular architecture. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a big question, but I'm just really interested in these kind of like the principles of architecture that your group is kind of rediscovering, and how you see that knowledge potentially even entering the like the academic space for like a new generation of architects being trained today.
Yes, very interesting question. And it was with the Universidad Iberoamericana, especially with one professor that it's called Juan Casillas. And he's an architect that he has been struggling a lot with this within this university, especially with bringing all this other knowledge that are not teach in the universities. And of course, like I could talk about, because for us, this is a really central point of what we are doing in the space. Is not only to reclaim like the knowledge, but it's also to build in that knowledge. I could share this history that when we start the construction of the Mayan house here, the Mayan house, actually the construction of the houses that you saw, it has around like 3,000 years of existing the same way as you see it now, as we build it now. It is the same way that it was used to be built in the past, like 3,000 years ago. So the preservation of this knowledge is very alive in the community. But when we wanted to construct the houses here in Suumil Móokt'aan, we realized that only the elders have the knowledge to construct it. And most of them, they were really old and they didn't like make it or like to construct it with us. So we bring an elder from 83 years old, and he helped us to build the first house, and we learned from him. And he was the one that shared the knowledge with Angel and with several youth from the village. And after that, we start to build our own houses. Like we learned how to do it. And actually that was the last building that this elder made, the construction here. And then we learned and we replicated. And now other youth are learning how to build the Mayan houses. So maybe if we hadn't been here at this moment, the knowledge will be lost now because he cannot longer construct houses because he's sick. So this is like this point in which we realize how important is also that in other spaces, like in institutions, universities could also learn and share other kind of knowledge that are not at the service of these big hotels or companies. I think you saw in Merida all these huge problems also with the real estate and the gentrification also of the city, and how expensive now is to live in the city in Merida. So what we trying to reclaim is also this way of building the our knowledge, but also to share this knowledge with the communities and with the other institutions, universities in the city also. And I'm sharing this link now of one professor in Mérida that it's called Aurelio. And he made this beautiful documentary about how we are reclaiming the Mayan house, not we Suumil Móokt'aan, but the Mayan people still reclaiming the Mayan house. And he's also an architecture, and he's trying to bring also this knowledge into the universities. So we could acknowledge, but also not to follow the mainstream ways of construction that the modern systems say that you need to build this kind of houses so it's safe to live, or it's most of the time what happened is that the government say that these kind of houses are houses for poor people. So the idea of the poor living like in bad situation, in critical situation, it's something that we need to remove from our minds and our hearts. Like we need to reclaim our knowledge and make it possible also. And not only to say, the Mayan house is beautiful. No, we need to embody and live here and say, this is a dignified way of living. That's.
Thank you so much. It's really an exciting topic. I'm really, really interested.
Okay, so hold on. It's 11:30, and hold on. It's 11:30, and the participants need to walk and get to the Residency Unlimited, and it takes a lot of time. So I think I'm going to close it here if you don't mind. But it's been incredible, and thank you so much for your time and your energy and your thoughts and your awareness and making us aware and sharing it with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good program, and
yeah, okay.
Ciao, bye. Grazie.
Antonia.